WELOVE
108
FM.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Chat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my co-hosts, Mr. Senior Love Daddy.
Hi, y'all.
And Big D Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
Each week, we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, or want to choose one for yourself, please visit shatpod.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we will provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie takes to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective Season 3, Lovecraft Country, and Watchmen. Find all information at past episodes at shatpod.com/TV. And finally, if you'd like to hang out with us live, follow and subscribe to our Twitch channel, shatpod.com/Twitch, and our YouTube channel, where we have 12-minute clips of the last 3 rounds of our fantasy baseball draft, play video games, host watch parties, and edit this podcast live. All that being said, Big D, what movie are we reviewing tonight?
Gene, one of the things I think is great about this podcast is the variety of films we do. And lately we've been on kind of like a weird tear. We've done like robots that gain sentience. We have alien abductions, kids who just want to talk hard and they want to start a pirate radio station. Girls out on the lam in the Texas underground trying to get her $600 back. And then there's the films like tonight, the ones that we need to occasionally throw in there to tell the people who we say we don't do popular, well-known movies, that we're too obscure. So this is our Shat weekend for our Criterion collection, I would say. It's Academy Award nominee. And it is such a change of pace in what we were doing. So I was very excited when our great listener, Grant Leisure, wrote in and said, please, can you review the 1989 comedy, Do the Right Thing?
Well, you wrote in and said, hey, Shat Crew. First off, I want to thank each of you for all the time and hard work you put in the pod. Every week, you provide us an opportunity to zone out of our personal lives to enjoy conversations about movies. I also want to thank all the commissioners. One of my favorite parts of the pod is listening to how different people connect with a movie. It's such a polarized world, and it's nice to hear the shared connections we may have to help us realize we may have more in common than not. Like many movies, the one I commissioned, Do the Right Thing, reminds me of the times I spent with my father. After my parents divorced when I was in 3rd grade, I spent every other weekend with my dad. He worked quite a bit of overtime, but when he didn't, we go to the movies. He took me to see Total Recall, Basic Instinct, Silence of the Lambs, Dr. Giggles, and the recently reviewed Pump Up the Volume. Despite my age, nothing seemed off limits. Ash's take on Pump Up the Volume is spot on. However, Do the Right Thing was not one of those movies I saw in the theater. My father had all the movie channels, so when he was working, I was watching movies. I developed a love from great films to crappy B films. And yes, I watched Class of Nukem High at my dad's house.
Yeah.
I saw Do the Right Thing around 12 years old, a couple of years after its theatrical release. I remember watching this for the first time at my dad's. It's the first movie that emotionally impacted me. It left me shook, knots in my stomach and pains in my chest. In my mind, it's one of the greatest films ever made. A masterclass in character development and storytelling by Spike Lee. Ernest Dickerson's cinematography is next level and the acting is on point. Unfortunately, this subject is timeless. The film shed light on social injustices that had been happening and that were going to soon happen, think Rodney King, and that are still happening 35 years later. There's nothing I can say that hasn't already been said about this film. Read Ebert's essays for starters. Personally, it's a film that's hard to revisit, but necessary to help myself understand differences and what connects us. I hope this movie left an impression on you as much as it has on me. Thank you. And lastly, back to Pump Up the Volume. Maybe that wasn't the radio movie the team Shat needed. I'll commission Oliver Stone's talk radio if you're up to it. Let me know, and thanks again. Sincerely, Grant Leisure.
Grant, I'm glad you brought up this topic in your commission about the fact that a film that is widely considered divisive, like Do the Right Thing, also can serve to bring people together as they find similarities there. And I think that when Big D and Ash and I discuss movies with each other, particularly when we have different views of the film, it helps me understand them each a little bit more when you really digest the viewpoint that a person is coming from. And I never really thought about that, how movies can bring people together. And I'm not just talking about the big blockbuster fuck yeah movies, but also movies that inspire a little bit of thought.
And I think the important thing, Gene, a lot of times, like we talked about this with Saving Private Ryan, it starts the uncomfortable conversations, whether it's with grandpa and what happened to him in the war, or the topic of social injustice and racial bias and police brutality. These are conversations that a lot of times normal people don't talk about until a movie like Do the Right Thing comes out.
Or when Roger Roper questions The Greatest Generation because they came back and smacked up their wives.
That son of a bitch.
And were racists.
Roger.
Do the Right Thing is a 1989 comedy produced, written, and directed by Spike Lee. Starring alongside Lee are Danny Aiello, Ozzie Davis, Ruby Dee, Richard Edson, Giancarlo Esposito, Bill Nunn, John Turturro, and Samuel L. Jackson. The feature film debut of Martin Lawrence and Rosie Perez, Do the Right Thing explores a Brooklyn neighborhood's simmering racial tension between its African-American residents and the Italian-American owners of a local pizzeria, culminating in tragedy and violence on a hot summer's day. A critical and commercial success, the film received accolades, including Academy Award nominations for Best Original Screenplay and Best Supporting Actor for Aiello's portrayal of Sal, the pizzeria owner. In 1999, it was selected for the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress, and in 2022, the film was ranked the 24th greatest of all time in a Sight and Sound magazine poll. So Big D, Ash, we always ask where you were and what your memories are of the movie we're covering. Tonight, it's Do the Right Thing. Big D, as the native New Yorker, we'll start with you.
So for me, it's weird. Like, Grant mentioned Rodney King. For me, a lot of these controversies that we'll get into later on, they hit home because I grew up in a time when there was a lot going on in the city. It felt like it was ready to explode at any point. And I don't remember the movie as much as the whole drama behind it, about everything that was going on with the controversy. And I don't know if, like, outside of New York, it's just like I assume when a hurricane hits Florida and it's on all the news, I'm like, oh, this must be everywhere. So I don't know. And as we get into this movie, it'll be interesting to hear what the perception of New York in the 80s was. But the movie got generally good reviews. But then I remember there was a vocal minority of the critics who said this is going to cause people to come out and riot. This is reckless. How could you do this? Spike Lee came out and said, I think it's wrong that you're going to say that black audiences are incapable of restraining themselves. In the end, there was no riots, but the film, much like we've already mentioned, it started some long overdue conversations, at least with me and my family, and had me thinking about things that I hadn't at that point, being, like 15 years old.
Yeah, Big D, to answer your question, those racial issues that were front page news in New York were not necessarily across the country, at least not for kids, right? So as a 9-year-old in Arizona, I had no concept of anything that was going on in New York, any racial tensions. And it largely had to deal with the fact that it's fairly homogenized here, particularly in the 80s, right? You're either white or you're Mexican. And thankfully, I got mistaken for both. So I could kind of pass anywhere I went. It was pretty awesome. But this commission led me to discover the only Spike Lee movie I had seen to date was Kings of Comedy, which is barely a movie. Like, it's a stand-up movie. And so apparently I had taken all the Mars Blackman Nike ads and put them together in my head into a movie and figured I'd actually seen a real Spike Lee movie. So this is my first time going through, not casually seeing parts of a movie. Sure, I think every 80s kid saw parts of Do the Right Thing, but I never really sat down and digested it as a 2-hour film. And now that I have lots to say about it. It might upset a few listeners. And what I want to say as a caveat, this is fresh to me. I just saw it this week. This is a dialogue. I'm figuring out what I think about this movie. I am by no means the expert, and that I welcome that dialogue with the audience, with the listeners, with you guys, to get a better understanding of what it is that I saw and really experience this movie as a project for myself, not just a one-time sit down and watch it.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. What's interesting is the first two times I saw this, it was in a setting that was academic. So I saw this for the first time in a film class when I was at Tulane University. It was like, I don't know, 2007, 2006, something like that. And I again watched it as a part of a critical race theory class I had in my master's program in graduate school. And I remember loving it. And both professors had very different takes on the film and its usage and its importance. So that was pretty cool. I, in general, have a huge amount of respect for Spike Lee, and it is very, very selfish why. After Hurricane Katrina, it's so interesting you brought up hurricanes, Big D, because after Hurricane Katrina, New Orleanians in general, we felt immensely completely misunderstood by most of the nation and understanding what had happened, that it was not just your typical, hurricane. Like, it was really a human travesty and a massive failure in the political system. And Spike Lee did the most amazing documentary series for HBO about Hurricane Katrina that really got a lot of people to understand how bad it was. And I will always have a huge affinity for him because of what he did with that. And it's a phenomenal, fascinating documentary. All of you should go watch it if you haven't seen it. So Spike Lee in general, I have a huge, huge connection to. And because of both that and my previous positive experiences in seeing this film, I was really excited to watch it for the pod. But, much like our foray into Lovecraft country, which we were talking about prior to recording, this is certainly, there's an irony here that the three of us are the ones covering Do the Right Thing for sure. So at least that's been said at least three different ways before we even begin.
Ash, I'm so glad you brought up When the Levees Broke, because I, forgot that was a Spike Lee thing. And now I can actually say I had seen The Kings of Comedy and Something of Substance plus Do the Right Thing. So I feel somewhat absolved. And yeah, I agree with you. If people haven't seen that documentary, it is fantastic. Check it out. But before you do that, let's hit the trailer.
Ooh-wee. It's gonna be a scorcher today.
Universal Pictures presents a new film from Spike Lee.
Good morning, Miss Mother Sister.
Now, Mookie, don't work too hard today. The man says it's gonna be hot as the devil.
I've been here 25 years. Sal's famous pizzeria is here to stay.
Trust me.
Mookie, the last time I trusted you, we ended up with a son.
I know you can't stand it. You can't stand it.
Hey, Sal, how we gonna brothers on the wall here?
You want brothers on the wall?
Love.
Get your own place. You can do what you want to do.
What I tell you about that noise? What I tell you about them pictures?
You talk some brother talk to him.
You the man.
No, you the man.
No, you the man.
No, you the man.
The first time you turn your back, boom. Right here, man, in the back. Y'all take a chill. You like to sign a petition to boycott Sal's famous pizzeria?
Hear me, what you ought to do is boycott that no-good barber that messed up your head.
And that's the double truth. Rude.
Fight the power. Fight the power.
Deep down inside, I think we wish you were black.
Who told you to step on my sneakers? Who told you to walk on my side of the block? Who told you to be in my neighborhood?
I own this brownstone.
Who told you to buy a brownstone on my block, in my neighborhood, on my side of the street? I can't even hear myself think!
From Spike Lee, director of School Days and She's Gotta Have It.
Good people, please. If we don't stop this, and stop it now, we gonna do something we gonna regret for the rest of our lives. Doctor?
Come on, what?
Always do the right thing.
That's it?
That's it.
I got it. I'm gone.
"25-year-old Mookie lives in Bed-Stuy with his sister Jade and has a toddler son, Hector, with his girlfriend, Tina. Mookie works as a pizza delivery man for Sal Frangione. Sal's racist son, Pino, antagonizes Mookie and clashes with his father, who refuses to move his business out of the black neighborhood. But Pino's younger brother, Vito, is friends with Mookie. The neighborhood's residents include friendly drunk Da Mayor, Mother Sister, who observes the entire block from her brownstone, Radio Raheem, who blasts Public Enemy's Fight the Power on his boombox, and Smiley, a mentally disabled man who sells hand-colored pictures of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr.
I know that this movie was made in 1989, so I understand it's in this weird juxtaposition between the 80s and the 90s. But for me, this film feels very uniquely early 90s and not so much 80s. Like, it feels like we've already transitioned into what the early 90s would be. And on this pod, multiple times, I have complained about the way movies in this time period start, and like these very long title sequences, like often like very awkward graphics over the title sequences. It's very much like of its time. And this could be one of those, because if you've not seen it, they play the entirety of Public Enemy's Fight the Power over the beginning of this movie, over all the title sequences. And it is just like these different shots of like a bad music video with Rosie Perez dancing. And that may sound awful.
Terrible.
But it's not. Like, I just cannot not love the start of this movie. She is incredible. She is so hot. Like, she's super swaggy, and it could be cringe, but like it's not. It's like very, no pun intended, powerful, and I think sets the scene. And when it's like going back and forth and she's doing that routine, like that early 90s like very street style of dancing, like I was eating up every single second.
You see, this is why I'm glad we have three hosts here, because I saw something completely different. It felt like a mix between the opening to In Living Color with J-Lo,
Fly Girls,
and like West Side Story. You had where it was obviously a set. It looked like a stage, and she's out there. I'm not going to judge the woman on her physical appearance, but she looked like it was a mix of she was angry, she was an animal ready to attack, or she had to shit. So she was like, and she's gyrating, and she's going, and she's wearing like 3 or 4 different outfits. There's like a blue suit, there's a leotard.
They're so good.
There's a leather jacket, the giant hoop earrings, and it is so jarring because it's just right down your throat.
The third outfit's where I lost it. Like, I get the first one. She's in the red dress, and then she's like in boxing gear, and I get it. We're going like translating between your street clothes and like your combat clothes. I get that. Then they just throw in the blue leotard. I'm like, come on now. This is getting ridiculous. And Big D, I normally really, really enjoy when a woman is getting down and she's got like the face. Like, I get that. But yeah, you're right. It then goes into like, I ate a grapefruit and I'm taking a shit face. She's making ugly faces, and she is a dancer, but she's not an ugly dancer. She's a good dancer.
She's passionate.
She is very uniquely early 90s, late 80s hip hop. Like, this is what it looked like. This is what it was supposed to look like. And she embodies it. And I don't know, I thought it was like a really incredible like cultural moment. Like, it had to be really badass to see this in 89.
You know, New York in the 80s, growing up, I was a young teenager, and I loved it where they're talking about the heat, and you see all of the New York papers, the Post, the Daily News. That's the way it was when you would see these headlines. And I felt like I grew up, and there was something every year, every summer, some major issue that we were grappling with, racial tension and conflicts and riots. We now think of George Floyd. We think of Rodney King. New York had their own like every year. There was the Howard Beach incident in 86. There was a group of white teenagers who attacked 3 black men, and it ended up with one of them being killed. You had the Central Park jogger case.
Mm-hmm.
There were 5 black and Latino teenagers accused of raping this white woman jogging. In the end, they didn't do it. They were innocent. Then you had a Crown Heights riot in 91, where there was a black child who was killed by a Jewish religious leader's motorcade that had a Crown Heights in flames for multi-day riots. Then in 87, which was mentioned in this, it's scrawled on the back of the wall. It says, Tawana was telling the truth. I was like, holy shit, the Tawana Brawley case. It was a black teenager. She claimed that she was assaulted by white men. In the end, it wasn't clear whether it was a hoax or what happened, but Sharpton and all the leaders they talk about were out there. Then you had another Jewish African-American issue with the Bensonhurst racial attack in 86 with Yusuf Hawkins. This shit happened all the time. Now, I don't know if like outside, like I mentioned, of New York, people knew about this, but it felt like that tension. It felt like the city was going to explode. So Spike had a lot of material to work with, And this felt like a hybrid of what I had lived through when I was a young kid.
Big D, as a kid who was born in New York and had a family that had preconceived notions of neighborhoods in New York, I was always fascinated by which neighborhoods were like a no-go when I was a kid. And then as I got older, it was like sort of okay. And then it was like, this is perfectly safe. So for example, growing up in Queens and Forest Hills, we were told Brooklyn was just off limits completely, right? You go to Manhattan, that's fine. Queens, okay. Brooklyn, no, we're not doing that. Then in the 2000s, my friends start graduating college. They're all moving to Red Hook. They're all moving to Greenpoint. They're all moving to Park Slope. And that was okay. But like you're talking about like Bushwick and Bed-Stuy, no. Then it became Bushwick's okay. Bed-Stuy, still a no-go. And so I sat straight up when I saw, oh, this movie's set in Bed-Stuy. Awesome. Like, I want to see what the neighborhood is like from an insider perspective, right? I know Spike Lee is part New York, part Atlanta, but still, he's painting a picture of what a neighborhood in Bed-Stuy is like. So it was interesting to see in 89, we're seeing that there are characters, but it's still pretty run down economically, that there's like not a lot of options as far as food and shopping, and that there is this racial tension and there is this violence. From what I've read, I haven't been in years, but what I've read is now Bed-Stuy has boutique stores and luxury apartments. And what I thought was really fascinating is in 89, 100% of the population of this neighborhood was Black and Latino. The one white guy you see in the movie, other than Smiley, that is a real oddity.
My brother lived in Bed-Stuy for years, and it was bougie as shit. Like, I mean, his apartment was beautiful, and there was everything that you could want, like, all around there. And I mean, he also lived in Williamsburg. He also lived in Bushwick. Like, he lived all throughout Brooklyn. And I mean, it looked completely different than you see in this film. But, you know, Big D, you mentioned a lot of those cases. I mean, the Howard Beach incident is what inspired Spike Lee to make this film. Like, that was the inciting, you know, moment for him. And I think that we have to remember that from this time period, you know, it wasn't until movies like this, Boys in the Hood, like, you could not overstate the importance. And I know it was two different coasts for those two films that I just mentioned, but like, you couldn't overstate the importance of white audiences and audiences that didn't look like the faces that were in these films, seeing them, because they had no exposure. And it wasn't until Rodney King was taped that we saw police brutality for the first time, where it wasn't, you know, dramatized in a Hollywood film like this. So no, I don't think anybody knew except for the people who were living it day to day. And that's what was so fucked up about it. And that's why movies like this were so important.
So I know a lot of people think this is, Spike's magnus opus. This is his major masterpiece. It's the top on a lot of people's list for his most impactful movies. And he has the same style through most of his films. And he does a lot through the commercials, even the whole Mars Blackman thing, the way he introduces characters and the way his characters talk in the dialogue. He's just like a lot of the other movie makers who have their style. And all I just kept thinking, as this movie, we go from the dance sequence to the introduction of all the people in the neighborhood. It's going to all take place on this one square block. So it's going to take us from person to person. And I kept in my head hearing Gene on the Hawk the Slayer episode, where Gene said, why does every time that Hawk the Slayer teleports to pick up a member of his group, he always teleports right into the exact moment that one of those guys was being accosted, that he was being like about to be stabbed, about to be shot with a bow and arrow? Every moment was like this hyper moment where the timing was perfect. And Gene said, why can't we just pop into a moment where the guy was sitting at home having soup? And that kept popping into my head, because every time we meet a character, everyone is yelling. Everyone is screaming. We meet Mookie. He's screaming at Jade. He's screaming at his mom. Then Rosie's screaming at the babysitter. Vito's screaming at Mookie. Everybody is screaming. And it's almost as if each person had their own stereotypical extreme version of themselves. And every time we see them, they're at their most apex energized. They're like Mars Blackman, up in the camera's face, screaming. The only exception is Mother's Sister. She had some moments of quiet dialogue with the mayor, but everyone else, I'm like, why can't we just have a normal conversation?
I'm so glad you brought this up, Big D. It is cartoonish. The Italians, they're yelling at each other. Young black men yelling at each other. Rosie yelling at fucking everybody. And I made the mistake of watching this movie while I already had a headache. I was ready to smash the fucking TV set. I was so pissed off. But thinking about it, it's intentional, right? Again, like I said, slow digest on this movie. I'm still kind of grappling with it. The heat, the yelling, the tight shots of the sweaty faces, people being impolite to each other. I think the movie is trying to make us feel that things are at a boil so that we internalize that. So we're stressed out too. At least I hope that's the case.
I mean, I think it's definitively the case. I mean, they used a lot of really interesting filmmaking techniques where they, use these different flammable substances that they would burn right underneath the cameras, so that like the smoke and like the distortion of those heat waves would come up and like cloud the cameras themselves. And I think all of that works. And I think what they're trying to show is not just like that it's hot, like the heat is also a metaphor for the neighborhood, right? That it's like going to boil over at any moment because of all this stuff that's underlying, like the vapor that nobody can like get a hold of, which is this racism, which we see in the moments where they have the tirades, at one another, or the moments where they lose their shit and they break shit with a baseball bat. Like, it's just everybody is on edge because it's just simmering just right below the surface because of the world that they're like living in and this oppression they're living under.
I mean, I think you can feel the miserable condition. You can feel the heat. And for me, it's one of the worst parts of New York. This is the summers are miserable. And I grew up with no air conditioning. We had one window unit that we would put in the living room, and everybody would throw the mattresses on the floor, and that's where we would sleep. So as I'm watching the film and we're starting to see the characters up close, they're sweaty. I know what it feels like to have the wet sheet stuck to my back. I can hear the oscillating fan. I can hear the window box fan. I can feel it because in New York in the summer, there is almost no breeze. So you get outside and it might not be 105, 110 like Arizona, but you get out and the humidity hits you and you're sticky and you got to go like Mookie, go home and take another shower. And now I live, oddly enough, in a place where people say, oh, Florida summers are the worst. I completely disagree. We have a coastal breeze. It blows across at like 4 o'clock every day, rains a little bit, and then it resets. But between the three of us, we have most of the miserable hellscapes in the United States covered. So I want to talk. I think New York summers are the worst because of the dead, sticky air and the lack of any kind of internal air conditioning. What do you guys think?
Before I answer your question, I have a question for you. Are you the guy that survived that and now keeps your AC at like 68 all the time? Or are you the guy that survived that and you tell Emma, no, this was way worse. You don't need air conditioning. Just crack a window.
So I live with a Latina. And my wife, if it is below...
Oh, I hope that's who you're talking about.
She could not live in cold conditions. Yeah. So anything below 75 and she is miserable. She's covering up. She's got blankets. So out of respect for her, I keep it at 75. If I was to my own devices, it would be 68 degrees.
If I put the house at 75, Sarah would stab me in the face in the summertime. We are a hang out in your underwear kind of household, and we like it that way. Now, to answer your question, Big D, I am biased because I hate sunlight. And I'm not saying that like a goth thing. I despise the feeling of sun directly on my skin. I think it feels terrible. I feel like I'm burning. I don't like it. Desert nights, not bad at all. Like just like you said with the coastal breeze, once the sun is gone, no matter how hot it is in Arizona, the air kind of feels cool. If you're moving, if you've got a fan going at all, you're totally fine. I think I deal pretty well with humidity. Like there were people who were really struggling with us in June in New Orleans, and I felt fucking great. I just need a drink. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, it's already hot here. Like it's summer already in Texas. It was 89 today. It gets oppressively hot here, but it's also really humid. And I hate it. I loathe hot weather. To have been born in New Orleans and to live here, I'm like Eugene. I absolutely despise the feeling of sun. I think it is the worst feeling in the world. It makes me feel immensely uncomfortable. I can deal with humidity, but I don't love it. I am that person that keeps our house very cold. If my air was on 75, it would be because it was broken and it was 75 outside. I think the greatest thing in the world is to be outside and it's gross and to like walk in and hit that wall of frigid air. Like it is the best fucking feeling ever. So like right now my air is on 67 because it's nighttime.
I'd love that.
And we have a very energy efficient home. So our power bill is only like $140 a month, but our air is literally on 67 right now. But, you know, I will say, I remember when my brother moved to New York and I went and visited him for the first time, and I had no clue that he would only have a window unit. And I about suffocated to death. Like I was just like a dog in a car, like hanging my head out his window, like begging for air constantly. And then this summer when he got married, I brought my son with me. I brought Finn with me to New York, and Finn was so confused. He's like, I think something's wrong. He kept asking if Jory was poor because his AC didn't work. And it's like, we're in this schwanky Chinatown, you know, beautiful loft. And he's like, but it's so hot. And so we had to just kind of follow Finn around with a fan and a mister because he had no idea what to do.
At Sal's, Mookie's friend Buggin' Out questions Sal about his wall of fame, decorated with photos of famous Italian Americans, and demands that Sal put up pictures of black celebrities. When Sal declines and ejects him, Buggin' Out attempts to start boycotting the pizzeria. During the day, some teenagers open a fire hydrant until white police officers Mark Ponte and Gary Long intervene. After Mookie confronts Pino about his contempt toward African Americans, Pino expresses his hatred for African Americans to Sal, who insists on staying in the neighborhood. Okay, Buggin' Out, Giancarlo Esposito, completely out of line.
Awful.
Demanding that Sal put photos of black heroes on the wall of fame. It is Sal's business. He's not refusing people service. He's not kicking people out. All he's saying is, hey, it's my place. I will put what I want on the wall. He gets to decorate it any way he sees fit. Could Sal have been cool about it and maybe added Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. to the wall? Sure, he could do that. But it is a pizzeria owned by an American Italian who is demonstrating his own pride in his own people. Am I wrong here?
No, I mentioned it earlier. Pizza Connection, the Mamaroneck. They had the wall of Italian fame. That's how I knew about The Godfather, was because of the photos on the wall. And I think that Buggin' Out, he was an asshole. From the moment he walked in, he was looking for a fight. It just happened to be the wall of photos. He starts with, the price of pizzas, and then, it's an extra 50 cents for extra cheese. Then he starts in on the photos. And Sal responded, I thought it was measured and accurate. He wasn't disrespectful. He didn't mention why he didn't. He said, you get your own place. You put all the pictures up there you want of the brothers. You put them up there. And then he finally got kicked out because he was becoming a disturbance to the business and he was being a problem. But no, I think a lot of this falls on his looking for a fight and Sal unfortunately walking into it.
I don't know. I mean, one of my favorite interludes in this movie is actually the argument they have over the cost of pizza. I think it's so funny and it's so indicative of like New York in general, where he's like, it's $2 for extra cheese. And he's like, $2. And then he takes, the cheese shaker and he starts shaking it out, and then he gets pissed because he's using too much of the Parmesan cheese. Like, I think that part is really, really great. Do I think that he could have picked a different battle? Sure. Yes. I think he could have picked a different battle than this wall of fame, but I think that this is the same argument that a lot of people have about a lot of conversations that are still had today, right? So it's like, if a school is named after someone that isn't representative of the community, then a lot of people get really offended when they're like, oh, well, that's my history, right? Like, those are my people, but your community doesn't represent those people anymore. So then you change the name. And I think that what he's doing here, I think that the whole point that, Buggin's making here is that Sal's people don't represent the people who frequent his shop. And so, like, you're a part of a community that looks very different for the most part than you do. And we come in and we pay you all this money. It would be nice if you represent our community. And do I think it's a great argument? I mean, I think there's a lot of, validity to your point, Gene, but I think that's the point that Spike Lee's trying to make here is that like they feel like the community they're in is not being represented and they don't feel it's being represented anywhere. So like fucking sucks when it's also not represented in the place where you live.
You see, but I think it's just Jade. If you look, no one else in the neighborhood agrees with it. When Bugging Out tries to recruit other people to the boycott, everybody says, no, I'm not going to boycott it. The pizza's good. No, he's been here for 25 years. He takes pride in the fact that he's raised a lot of us on it. And Jade calls him out and says, listen, if you want to make a change, why don't you focus your energy on something positive in a different direction? So I don't think anybody else in the community, other than Buggin', was having a problem with Sal's Pizza Wall of Fame.
And this really gets into what makes this movie wonderful is that you're seeing a situation where actually both parties are wrong. Both parties are wrong here because Bugging Out is wrong because he's demanding that a business owner decorate in a certain way. And Sal is wrong because what's it going to hurt? If you put one more photo on the wall, two more photos, it's not going to hurt anything. In fact, it's probably good for business. People would say, wow, he's got pictures of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King on the wall. He's paying attention to us. I'm going to go buy more pizza. We love this guy. Sal's the best, right? My favorite segment of the movie is when the characters just unload racial slurs directly at the camera. And they're targeting Italians, Blacks, Jews, Asians, Puerto Ricans. It felt so cathartic. And it's not because I want to hear the words, and it's not because I want the freedom to say them. I would be very uncomfortable saying those things. It felt like the release of a pressure valve, like all the characters and maybe the country were holding these thoughts and not saying them. For listeners out there, if you claim that you never have racist thoughts, I call bullshit. We all do it. So we had renters. Sarah said, oh, this dude's bringing his parents over from India, and there's going to be 5 people staying in the house, in a 3-bedroom house. And immediately, racist shit jumped into my head. They're going to make the house smell. They're going to be difficult to deal with. That's racist. That's fucking racist. I don't know those people. I'm being prejudiced toward them. I'm making them less than human, right? I feel like in going through these tirades, it really led me to examine what I was not saying and why it's racist. And I think that hearing these things for people is helpful so they can do their own self-examination.
So I was expecting the film to be primarily against white guys, against the Sal and the Italians and how they were terrible. So here, it was like a chain of insults that I felt where they have the people come out and they're all saying the worst thing. And it's not a top-down thing. They're making, how, Gene, the way you tighten up lug nuts in a tire,
absolutely,
you go like across, up and down. Here, every group is making fun of the other. There's not one that's spared. They're going back and forth, whether it's the Jewish, whether it's African-American, the Latinos, it's the whole group. And even between them, the young and the old, everyone is making fun of each other. And I know today you can't do any of it, but I don't think all of it's mean-spirited. The only one, I think, who does not get any kind of compassion is the mockery that they make of Smiley. Everyone goes after Smiley. I guess, Spike wanted to do a film about equality, except for the mentally impaired guy, because that poor guy, Smiley, he does not get any justice in this chain of insults.
I mean, I think what he's showing, including Smiley, because Spike Lee is brilliant, is he's showing the different tiers of like oppression and othering. And he uses Smiley to show that there's something beyond what this first level is. Like there's one person that's everybody's common enemy that's like truly like the othered individual in Smiley. But oh my God, it makes my skin crawl, which is the point that Spike Lee is making. But it makes me really, really uncomfortable. And I do agree with you. One of my favorite musicals, Avenue Q, right? Like everyone's a little bit racist. There's a reason that's such a brilliant song because I think there's a lot of truth to that. The danger here is actually, I mean, not to call you out at all, Big D, but it's in what you just said. And it's like, well, I don't know if all of it's like, some of it's in jest. You can't do that anymore, like that's a big thing. People are like, everybody's snowflakes today. We used to just be able to say stuff and people understood it was a joke. Well, it like never was a joke, right? When it was used by certain people. And I think the problem is that the racism that's being, shown here, it's more dangerous when it's wielded by certain groups against other certain groups. And this movie highlights that very well. It highlights those those different tiers of racism and how they weaponize words and how they weaponize actions, and immensely, like way, way, way ahead of its time.
See, but I think the most insidious version of racism is the unspoken, is the hidden, is the ones that's below the surface. I know the way guys are, the guys bust each other's balls. Sometimes I'm saying there are some things you can joke about, I think, that aren't insulting or dehumanizing. Somebody saying white guys can't jump, I'm not insulted. I think it's kind of accurate. I'm not going to take that as an offense.
Well, because there is no racism against white people.
Oh my God. Yes, that you can be racist. Of course you can.
No, you can't. You can't be racist about white people.
Of course
we're
you can.
Dominant. No, you can't, because we're the dominant class. You can't be racist
of course you can.
Against
there can
white
be
people.
somebody who holds power over another individual, and they could discriminate against them based on race. Whether you live in a place or you're applying for a job, let's say it's a primarily African-American job, and you can be discriminated if you are a Latino, if you are a woman. Yes, racism can exist.
Well,
yes.
Racism can exist. I'm just saying racism can against white people. Like, reverse racism's not a real thing.
Of course it is. I can be discriminated upon based upon my race.
No, you
if
can't.
Someone has power, of course I can.
You're a white, straight, cisgendered male. Like, you're the most privileged class that exists, like, in the whole world.
So if I apply for a job where someone does not like white people and they choose not to hire me because I am a white man,
that's not racist.
Mm-mm.
What is that? Discrimination?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That's discrimination, not racism.
Discrimination based on race.
Mm-mm.
So if I apply for a job, but quotas then discriminate against me as an individual, let's say
quotas are not racist against white people. They are to provide equality to individuals who've not had the ability to have equality in the past.
I understand it benefits to make things equal, but it also affects me in a negative way when I haven't done anything.
No, it doesn't.
I think it does.
It doesn't, because you have a systemic dominance.
So if that were the case, then I think white women in general really don't have a leg to stand on as far as discrimination, because you are also, I think, elevated above other races and classes and discrimination.
I'm definitely elevated above different races, but I'm still discriminated against because of the fact that I'm a woman and not a man.
But do you acknowledge your white privilege?
Yeah, all three of us.
As a white woman.
100%. But I also acknowledge that there is no privilege by my being a woman. Those are two very different things.
To clarify, white is not a race. So you refer to Sal as white. Sal is Italian American, or as he calls it, American Italian, and has been accepted into the brotherhood of whiteness because he lives in Bensonhurst and he owns a business and the cops are okay with him. He's become white. People always ask me, as an Iranian American, oh, do you experience racism? Oh, do people? No. You know why? Because we have been accepted into whitehood. Like, we are white now. Because most of us who come over are lawyers, doctors, engineers, or are fortunate enough to get out of Iran, and we do well economically. We don't engage in quote unquote crime. And so we're accepted. So when I show up to a party or apply for a job or do anything else, I qualify as white. Even with a name like Gene Lyons, I still qualify as white. Anyway, look at what this movie is doing. It is starting a conversation and a dialogue about what all these things mean. I'm speaking, again, from my knowledge of the subject, which is not absolute. I am totally open to an education on all viewpoints on the topic. That night, bugging out, Raheem and Smiley march into Sal's and demand that the Wall of Fame be modified. Sal demands that Raheem turn his boombox off and eventually destroys it with a bat. Raheem attacks Sal and drags him into the street. The police arrive and Officer Long strangles Raheem with his nightstick while Officer Ponte and the others plead with him to stop. Attempting to save face, the police place Raheem's body in the back of a car and drive off.
So now we're starting to get into the apex of the movie, the conflict, what the whole film has been building towards. It's the end of the hottest day of the summer. And I think for the first 100 minutes of Do the Right Thing, the main characters, they're developed enough that the audience, I think we get an accurate gauge of who they are, their personalities, how they're going to respond in a situation. Until the end here, Sal does, I felt it was an abrupt 180-degree heel turn. For 99% of the movie, Sal is a good dude. He's proud to be part of this community. He's watched the neighborhood grow up for 25 years. He's proud that the neighbors have raised their kids on his food. He's proud to have built his community. When everyone else said, like you said, let's go to Bensonhurst. He says, no, I want to stay here. We're part of this community. Whenever he's confronted by racists, whether it's the cops or Pino, always spouting shit and just talking trash and starting to conversations with a divisive nature. He says, you know what? I like it here. He seems to genuinely like Jade. Mookie questions whether he's trying to get with her. He seems to actually like her. And at the end of this day, it's been a long, hot day. This ends. It is an intimate moment. It's a family moment between Sal, Pino, Vito, and even Mookie, where they're kind of together. And he's saying, you see what you can do when you work together. And then all of a sudden, he lets the four young people in. Then you get in Radio Raheem, and he turns into instant David Duke. He's screaming the N-word 20 times. He's going after Raheem's radio with a bat. He beats it. It was a quick turn for somebody who had been very measured for most of the movie.
I don't feel that it was a heel turn. I feel that it was reality. So Sal is hurt. He's understandably hurt. I want to acknowledge that first off. He has a dream. This place means something to him, and that is crushed on a daily basis while working there. These guys come in, they're disrespecting him, they're disrespecting his business. He's always asking for is turn the music off, stop yelling at me. I think that all humans can understand not wanting that. And he's lashing out. He has built this business, as you said, Big D, with his hands. He has fed this neighborhood. He's hired Mookie. He feels all these things are good. And all he wants is a little bit of respect. And then Raheem comes in with bugging out. They're in his face. They're blasting music. He's just finished this long day of work. And from his view, he's the only person fucking working that day, right? This is the weekend after all. It's hot. He opened his door generously for just one more group of customers. And now he's being threatened in the place he considers sacred. Like, this place is more important to him than his own home. This is where he spends his time. This is his world that he's created. And so he loses his shit and he says the most hurtful things he can think. And he does the most hurtful thing he can think to do, which is to smash that boombox and to state that he killed it.
Again, Spike Lee is using a really, really effective technique here where he's showing that Sal's the person we've been following. A lot of the audience he's targeting that look like Sal, he's trying to get through to them to show that, like, sure, he's an okay person, but that racism is always simmering right below the surface. He doesn't have to dig deep for it. He may interact with them, he may pay them, they may be his customers, but it's there. Like, he's feeling that racist level, that racist commentary. It is accessible at all times. He just keeps it pushed down because that's what most people walk around and do. They take these, preconceived notions and they take their beliefs or racist beliefs or stereotypical beliefs about other people and they just don't say them out loud. That's why it's so uncomfortable when right previous to this, you have that whole tirade where people are actually saying those words out loud. Sal does not have to dig deep. He immediately goes for it and it comes out very, very easily from his mouth. Like, he's clearly said it before to other people. He's just never said it to their face before. I think it's supposed to be really jarring, but also like, duh. Like, of course he feels that way.
I want to do a quick turn, a heel turn like Sal did. Gene, I agree with you now. I think it was his anger. He lashed out. He was in a situation. Ash, you made it seem like he easily would revert to this, whereas throughout the day, he had scolded his sons for saying anything. I think this was a way for him to lash out in anger.
He scolded Pino. He didn't stop him. But I want to add a dimension to this that just came into my mind, right? Big D, this is the viewpoint of the imperialist or the colonizer. When colonizers and imperialists go in and they set up a colony and they're ruling over a country from abroad, what do they think they're doing? They think they're bringing civility. They're thinking they're bringing opportunity, economic development. They're doing all these things. But what are they really doing? They're exploiting the resources of the place. And the second that the natives turn on them or express displeasure, they feel that those people are somewhat ungrateful. Sal is happy to be there. But why does he not open up a pizzeria in Bensonhurst? It's not out of the goodness of his heart. Now, part of it is he wants to raise this neighborhood. He's been there for 25 years, but he says there's too much competition. He's the only guy on the block here, so he knows he's making the money. And he is taking their money, and then he doesn't live in the neighborhood. He's going back to Bensonhurst where he lives, and he can spend his money. He's got his car and all that stuff. Now, Jade. Why is he nice to Jade? Jade is easily the whitest black person in this movie.
Oh, that's racist.
She is, though. She's talking to Mookie. Where's your responsibility? She has no.
Well, that's your definition of whiteness.
She has no accent from the block. Did you notice that? She dresses differently from everybody else. Oh, no. Listen to Jade with your eyes closed.
She's acceptable.
She is the acceptable black. And that's why the imperialist likes her so much. Now, I'm not saying Sal is a bad guy. It's his worldview. His worldview is he is providing for these people. They owe him something.
Everything you just said, Spike Lee has said about what he did here. He didn't use the word colonizer, but that is what he used Sal for. Sal is supposed to be the device in the film that the white audience sees themselves in. You're supposed to, as a white person, see him as a hero. You're supposed to make excuses for him when he does what he does. You're supposed to feel some type of way about it as a white person viewing. And then black people that are viewing, or people of color that are viewing, view him in a very, very different way. And he's supposed to be divisive. His character's meant to do that.
And Big D, before it sounds like I'm like, oh, fuck Sal, like, blah, blah. The whole movie while I'm watching it, like in real time, I'm like, why is everyone being such an asshole to Sal? Like, Sal is the only guy serving food on the block. He doesn't have to fucking be there. He's there. He's giving opportunities to Mookie. And so I was angry. If there was one person I sided with in this movie the whole fucking time, it was Sal. But I had to acknowledge there were other parts of it. The ambiguity of the film is that it's not all coming from a place of like goodness.
In the end, I don't think he was the hero. I don't think he was the villain. I think he was a human being in the neighborhood. Again, remember, Sal never kills anybody.
Oh my God.
Sal never kills anybody.
Kills the boombox.
Everyone in this community had a little part. It was a chain reaction of events that led to this.
Which brings us to our next topic, which is Radia Rahim's death. Now, I am the furthest thing from a police apologist, but I want to point out a few things about Radia Rahim's death that make it so important in understanding this movie as a whole. And I don't want to sound like I'm lecturing people in my understanding of the movie as a whole. Radia Rahim, in any other movie, he's going to be a guy who quietly just goes around with his boombox. He's got a heart of gold. Nobody knew what he was all about. And then he died perfectly innocent. That is not a Spike Lee movie. Nope. Radia Rahim was not a nice guy. He bullied the boys with the smaller boombox. He bullied Sonny, the Korean shopkeeper. He tried to bully Sal, too. Does that make him a terrible person? No. But he is scary big. He is scary loud. He knows it, and he knows no one's going to fuck with him. And he is scary violent when he drags Sal over the counter and begins strangling him in the street. Not saying he deserves to die, but let's acknowledge the reality of the situation, right? Police had to intervene to save Sal's life. I firmly believe that Radia Rahim would have fucking killed him if the cops hadn't shown up. Nobody else was capable of pulling him off of there. So let's talk about Officer Long killing Rahim. We see earlier in the movie that Long has a fondness for Sal. He's in his pizzeria. They have interactions. They talk to each other like friends. You're this cop. You show up on the scene. You see Sal being choked on the sidewalk. This guy is trying to kill him. It's taking multiple officers to restrain Rahim, who is still fighting. He seems superhuman to any viewer, and I imagine to the police as well. And yes, Long goes way too fucking far. Okay, he murders a man. He's not operating rationally. He does not do the right thing. But guess what? As Big D said, nobody fucking does in this situation. Rahim didn't do the right thing. Bugging Out didn't do the right thing. Sal didn't do the right thing. Mookie didn't do the right thing. Pino didn't do the right thing. Not excusing the behavior of the officer, but it is a testament to what makes this movie great and different from most movies about race, is that we can clearly see everyone involved is fucking up in some way.
The argument you just made is a really interesting one that happens by a lot of different groups after a lot of different police brutality cases, even today. That's why George Floyd's criminal record gets brought up. It's why, why didn't he comply with the officer? Why did he ask questions? There's a lot of things that come into the picture where, like you said, at the end of the day, it's not excuse the brutality, where the person who has the power is the one who has to do the most right thing, if that makes any sense.
Yep.
And I think you see that here, that cop, yeah, he is human for sure, but he's in a position where he's supposed to do the most right thing in this situation. And I can't imagine how difficult that must be in a position like that, when you've got people screaming and you've got, it takes an immense amount of training, which is what gets talked about all the time in the news, is that, that's really what needs to happen, is more training for officers like Long here to know what to do in situations like this. But, the death scene here, I'm sure both of you remember when the Eric Garner case came out, that, Lee famously interspliced scenes from this death scene and the Eric Garner footage to really, really huge effect. And here, the piece is, we've got this in 89, but the death scene here is referencing a real life death in 1983 of Michael Stewart in New York, who died after the cops beat him so badly they gave him a spinal cord injury that killed him almost instantly after it happened. So I think the scene definitely works. I think the ambiguity makes for very interesting conversations. And again, let's just recognize that this is 89. Yeah. This is not made in 2020. It's not made in 2022, 2024. This is made way back in 1989 when I'm sitting here 6 years old. Gene, you're 9 years old. We were kids and now we're grown ass adults and we're still having these conversations. Again, you just can't applaud Spike Lee enough for beginning them way back then.
Yeah, I want to clarify that I'm not saying that I understand.
Oh, for sure.
Why Officer Long did what he did. Yeah, I'm just saying for the listeners. So my point here is that Spike Lee was more responsible than most directors, in that most directors would say, police mean, police kill people.
Right.
And this was a little bit different, where it said, this is what happens when police are not appropriately trained. This is what happens when people have emotional attachments. This is what happens when things get out of hand. It's not excusing any sort of behavior, but this is how shit actually goes down.
This is why.
This is why shit actually goes down. Exactly.
Yeah, because that's the problem, right? Is these situations, I mean, look at how much we've just talked tonight. These situations are not, no pun intended, black and white. Like, they're incredibly gray. Like, you don't just have a bunch of assholes walking around. They're like, I'm going to kill somebody today. I mean, maybe a few people, but like most of the time, it is a series of events that leads to tragedy. And that's why it's called Do the Right Thing. Is how do you even know what the right thing is to do when everybody's doing their own thing?
Well, devastated and enraged about Raheem's death, the neighborhood blames Sal and his sons, but the mayor unsuccessfully tries to convince the crowd of Sal's innocence. In a brief fit of anger and grief, Mookie grabs a trash can and throws it through the window of the pizzeria, sparking the crowd to rush in and destroy it. Smiley sets the building ablaze, and DeMayer pulls Sal and his sons away from the mob, which then turns towards Sonny's store, preparing to destroy it too. A panicked Sonny eventually dissuades the group.
So as we reach into the movie here, I think we all know how it ends with the trash can. I did not expect or remember that it was going to be Mookie. And it made me think about Mookie as a character. Throughout the movie, he is not likable. He's a shitbag.
Yeah.
He lies to his girlfriend. He does everything he can do to get out of the responsibility of being a man, of being a father, of being a boyfriend. He freeloads on his sister. He avoids taking his son. He slacks off at work. He doesn't care about anything outside his desire, and he says it all the time, to get my money. Okay, the block that you just read, Gene, says a brief fit of anger and grief. Mookie grabs the trash can and throws it through the window. Mookie has not been passionate about anything outside of what benefits him throughout this entire movie. He has never commented on any feelings about what's going on. Either way, he's apathetic. So it felt like a strange choice that he just chooses at the end there, as this is all going down, to walk over, grab the can, and throw it through the window. Because it's so strange that this guy who hasn't cared about anything this entire time, entire movie, this entire day, all of a sudden is going to be the one to choose to light this match to start going really, really, really badly.
I mean, I think it makes perfect sense that he's finally reached a point, right? Like, he's not loyal to Sal. It's a job to him. He's mad that his friend, Radio Raheem, was just murdered. Mookie's 25 years old, man. People do stupid shit. He's young. He's irrational. And in fact, this might be the only moment where we actually see him do something out of passion versus just doing something out of self-preservation.
Well, and just like we talked about the cop piece, I think what he's doing here, Spike Lee, is showing how quickly like riots also start. You know, I mean, all the time when you think about riot footage, like you see it in the middle of the riot, like when everything's already on fucking fire, like you don't ever see like those inciting incidents. And it's not like all of a sudden a building goes up in flames. Like there's one tiny spark, literally, that causes like the much bigger thing. And what you're seeing here is how also that so quickly can like roll out of control.
I was at Costco on Saturday and
toilet paper? Were they hogging the toilet paper?
No, man, no.
That Kirkland brand.
The line, you know, when they're checking you like out the door and they got to check your receipt?
Yeah.
That line backed up past the food court, past the merchandise pickup window. And so everyone's standing in line. It's a Saturday afternoon. It's like 2 p.m., man. Like, what did you fucking expect, right? And there's dudes yelling at the Costco employees, "Hey, bro." Mind you, it was a black employee too. "Hey, bro, why don't you get your managers, tell them to get their butts up front and get us out of here?" It was like a 5-minute inconvenience at most, right? And I turned to Sarah and I said, "This confirms my belief that society is like fucking on a razor's edge. Like any slight thing can just make things go to violence, right?" Now, let's think about this environment that we've established in this film, right? It's hot. There's tension. All it takes is a crack in that civility and all hell will break loose. And we see it here. And honestly, like that speaks to what Ash is saying is how does the riot start? The riot starts because we are in a constant state of restraint. And if that breaks at all, if there's a rip in that fabric, then everything's going to come pouring through. And it happens.
I can tell you, I was in New Orleans after Katrina. It is insane how quickly society will break down. It happens in like an hour.
Zombies. When police return with the fire brigade and riot patrols, the firemen turn their hoses on the rioters, leading to more fighting and arrests, while Mookie and Jade watch in shock from the curb. Smiley wanders back into the smoldering building and hangs one of the pictures on the remnants of Sal's Wall of Fame. The next day, when Mookie returns to Sal and demands his weekly pay, the two cautiously reconcile. Local DJ Mr. Senor Love Daddy dedicates a song to Raheem, and two quotations appear, expressing different views about violence, one by Martin Luther King and one by Malcolm X. Lee dedicates the film to the families of 5 black people killed by police: Eleanor Bumpers, Arthur Miller Jr., Edmund Perry, Yvonne Smallwood, and Michael Stewart, and Michael Griffith, who was killed by a white mob. We've talked a lot about the power of this film. I want to talk about the filmmaking that's involved. Big D always asks, like, what is a movie? Let's talk about that for a second. I have to point out, Spike Lee directs movies like a guy who's seen like one too many community theater productions and is striving very hard to capture that feeling on the big screen. Do I appreciate the decisions he makes from a storytelling perspective? Yes. Do I like the characters? Sure. Do I like the way this stuff looks? Not at all. Everything feels flat. The blocking feels incredibly stiff. We're talking like the opening scene of Death Becomes Her sort of stiff. Soliloquies, a little heavy-handed. There is one point in the movie where I just said, bah. The mayor and mother sister, they rise after the day of the riot and they walk facing the camera toward an open window with the sun shining on their faces. And he says, "I hope the block is still standing." And she says, "We're still standing." I fully expected like a fucking curtain to close and end the movie. This was incredibly disappointing filmmaking, Spike Lee.
Well, if it started out like it was on a set with the dance number, it would have been perfect if they bookended it. I would have expected it almost.
Just Rosie Perez busts out on the balcony.
And she's tapping.
What is that, tap?
Yeah, she's doing some kind of improvised dance.
I find a lot of the way that he directs this film off-putting with different close-ups, and it feels odd, right? Like it feels very much like an after school special and some of like the zooms and things like that. But I do think it's meant to be a video essay more than it is a movie. And that's why you've got the quotes at the end, because it's supposed to leave you with that dialogue. I mean, can you imagine sitting in an audience in 1989, going to see this in a theater with your girlfriend, your mom, whoever, right? And then the movie closes with basically what is a question to you about like, what is the necessity of violence?
Yeah.
And is violence ever like a real necessity? Like that's fucking brilliant. And so I don't know. I think in general, I think the ending of this film really, really works. I love that Mookie and Sal have to come back together because they live in the same neighborhood. Nothing's solved. The world still sucks. Racism still rampant. You know, that didn't go away. And a lot of films like Remember the Titans, they still play even though he's paralyzed. And they get along, you know. You've got The Blind Side, like, hey, look at him. He made all this money because the white people helped him. Like a lot of times, you know, movies that show the clash between black and white, like they feel this need to wrap it up neatly. And this movie very much, it's like, okay, well, we're back here and everything's burned to shit, but we got to keep living and it'll get rebuilt and it probably will get destroyed again because like we haven't fixed shit.
But I think also there was a conversation that went earlier when it was Sweet Dick Willie and the two other older guys.
Fucking love Sweet Dick Willie.
When they were talking about the Korean business. And they take both sides of the argument where he says, well, they're angry at them first. And they say, what the fuck? How did this Korean family, a year off the boat, come in here and then they have a store which has been vacant for years? And one of them, I don't remember which one it says either, you know, they're the smartest or it's us and what we're doing in our own community. So I think the movie does a good job in the end of balancing that out. You know, like we've had some heated discussions about everything that went on in this film. And I think it's a lot about accountability, that everybody's got a piece to play in whether we all hate each other, whether we all get along, making the world a better place. In the end, I thought it had some great conversations that even carried on tonight.
Would you guys agree, though, that like the film, from what I took from it, right, was this degree of resignation?
Yeah.
King B and I talk about that all the time. We'll get our famous breakfasts together over at the US Egg in beautiful Tempe, Arizona. And we talk about topics sometimes and go, yeah, this shit is not getting solved. Like, it's just not getting solved. The nature of humanity will not allow it. Should we try? Yes, of course, it's worth trying and trying to get better. But at the same time, is it ever going to be resolved? No. And we have to acknowledge that and then try to do our best. And speaking of doing our best, now's the time in the podcast we give our Shat score. 0 Wipes is a perfect movie. It is a full body ice cube bath on a hot Brooklyn day. And 5 Wipes is a disaster of a movie. It's when there's no more high life. I'll go first. I adore the ambiguity of the characters in this film. That part is brilliant. I'm just not a fan of Spike Lee's style in Do the Right Thing. The dialogue had a few highlights. A Big D, you mentioned Sweet Dick Willie and his crew. That was my favorite part of the movie. But often the dialogue felt really forced. The camera use was a little Sesame Street for my taste, to be honest. I felt like I was watching Sesame Street. And it really didn't need to be nearly 2 hours long. I feel like in some ways we were kind of in a little bit of a story swirl. Danny Aiello, John Turturro, incredible. And I've never wanted more badly to slap Giancarlo Esposito in the face. I can't say that I enjoyed this movie. We talk about film as you know, parts education, parts enjoyment. I don't know that I was actually entertained. I did feel educated. Ash, video essay is a great way to describe this film. I'm going to have to come in at 3 Wipes.
Yeah, I definitely don't think that this movie's perfect. I mean, it's far from perfect. I think it was perfect for the time that it came out. But, you know, remember our tagline, like, do the movies we loved when we were growing up still hold up? Like, do I think it still holds up? It's a brilliant film still. I think that it still holds up as being an inherently important film, but it's not perfect. I agree with you. It's way too long. I think coming in at like a hot, like, hour and 40 minutes could have been just as effective as coming in at 2 hours. I think it's got some weird choices in terms of camera angles, but I do think a lot of that was just the style of the time. But I don't know. Again, can't overstate its importance. It's a lasting power. I think Spike Lee's great in it. I think that John Turturro and Aiello is great. It's a reminder as well of how long we've had these issues and that nothing's changed. And I think that alone is a really important piece. So not perfect, way better than average. So I'm going with 1.5 wipes.
So I'm trying to balance here, and I'm going to pivot on what Gene said. Gene said that you are not a fan of Spike's style. I'm going to try to not mix that up and punish him for that, just because it necessarily wasn't for me and my feeling. I was originally going to go 1.5, but then I think that's a bit generous. I think not only was it Spike's style, but he was rough at this point. This was his third film. I went back and watched the parts of She's Gotta Have It and also School Days. He was rough. There's a scene in the beginning here where he kisses Rosie for the first time and the edit jumps. He kisses her, then the frame backs up about 5 seconds and he kisses her again. Some of his choices, like every time someone's having a verbal conflict, there's like smooth jazz riffs going over the top. Stuff like that you could feel his energy of a young director tackling a topic that was obviously very near and dear to his heart, passionate. He loves New York, big Yankee fan, big Knicks fan. It was a bit rough, but in the end, it's memorable for the performances and the conversations he's had. So I feel bad, but I think it's a 2-wipe film when you break it down. I would go 1.75, but I know you hate those quarter wipes, Gene. So I'm going to go with 2 wipes.
First of all, I have nothing against a quarter wipe. It's just when you get more specific than that. And don't feel bad, Big D. I went 3. So you're still on the positive side of things. So with 1.5 wipes from Ash, 2 wipes from Big D, and 3 wipes from me, that gives us an average wipe score of 2.16 repeating wipes for Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing.
So, Gene, with the score of 2.16, that now ties us with a big group of money. And I feel bad after this film to say, yes, this is on the same par as Major League, The Goonies, Under Siege, The Sandlot, Dusk Till Dawn, Usual Suspects, A League of Their Own, The Wedding Singer, Arthur, and Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me.
Not one of those is a bad movie. 2.16 is a respectable score.
I agree.
You hear me? Grant Leisure, respectable.
Respectable.
Well, next week's feature will take us back into the more of the traditional Shat fare. What do we have coming up, Big D?
Gene, next week, a normally unsuccessful habitual gambler experiences a day in which he wins every bet he places. Commissioned again by Grant Leisure. This came out in 1989, and I do not remember this film at all.
I feel like I'm going to learn a lot about horse racing and Richard Dreyfuss.
Both good things.
All right. Well, thank you, Grant, for your upcoming commission. Thank you for your commission of Do the Right Thing. I really, really appreciate the conversation that came out of it. That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. You can email us, host@shatpod.com. Support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, buying our merch, or by commissioning your own movie. Find all that information by visiting our website, shatpod.com. Also, check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV. We review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective Season 3, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. Find all information on our website, shatpod.com/TV. Wherever find podcasts we found, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D and Ash, I'm Gene Lyons. Join us next week for the following movie.
Excuse me, I'm taking a survey. What do you like?
Horse number 2.
The 4. The 1 horse.
I always bet on 5.
Up yours. Thank you.
Richard Dreyfuss is Jay Trotter, a man with nothing to lose.
You finished with that?
Knock yourself out, pal.
But an uninterrupted losing streak.
I don't deserve this anguish.
There's a horse in the 3rd race.
The man just said that the only way this horse can lose is if lightning strikes. What do you like? You like the odds on lightning?
I mean, really, I don't see why you people can't just watch the horses run around the track and not bet on them.
Just let me win this one.
Honey, some people like to rub me for luck.
I'm due.
But what's happening to him today?
My God, Trotter, you won!
Is one
I can't believe it!
For the books.
Congratulations.
You might be walking around lucky and not even know it.
$2,450.
I'm rich.
Give me the money.
Because Because when Jay Trotter wins,
What do you like in the third, huh?
he takes the world
7 horse.
along for the ride.
I'm having a good day. $69,000.
So where is all this money?
Let it ride. I put every penny on the number 2 horse hot to trot.
I have a house in the Bahamas and I love a middle of guts.
No! The horse is probably gonna swallow its tongue or something. He's coming through!
You're the greatest I've ever seen. I'll tell my grandchildren about you.
Richard Dreyfuss,
God likes me! He really, really likes me!
David Johansen,
I can't see, I'm going blind!
Terry Garr,
It's only money.
Jennifer Tilly,
This is what life is all about. Spontaneity, if you know what I mean.
Jockey's high on the horse. He's probably trying to get off!
One more word, I'll kill you.
They're glued together! I could lose! Come on! I thought we had a deal!
Let It Ride.
You're a wonderful guy. What a guy.
Is the bottom of it hot? Is it sitting on something soft?
No.
Okay, so there is air going under it.
Yeah, there's air going underneath it. Yeah.
Is it on your thick ass thighs?
But it's just, it sounds like.
It sounds like something's in the fan.
Yeah, I just need
frog.